Um, Hello and welcome to the Studio Utani podcast. I'm Matt Georgosa. I'm taking over for Mother 9000 while she does some cool stuff on the yeah, messing up here. Some cool stuff with Alien that hopefully we'll be able to talk about over the coming year. And I'm joined today by science fiction author Alex White. Thanks for joining us today, Alex.
Hey, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Do you prefer to be called a author or a writer? I think that question came up before, and
I don't, I don't actually care. I will say I used to, I went to, I went to New York one time with a good friend of mine. Well, not really, but anyway, he sucks. But I was like, he was like, I could get you into this party, and I was like, really? I'm not. I'm just a novelist. And he was like, well, not if you're gonna call yourself a novelist. And I was like, oh, is that snooty? I didn't know. Yeah,
yeah,
I'm.
it's all branding,
Mhm.
right? It's like how who you need to talk to in the moment and who you need to you know
Right.
how do you get your book sold?
I always thought that author was a little more kind of exciting than writer. I always felt like writer was like a work at like I'm at a
Yeah,
typewriter selling for 1 penny a word.
yeah, it's got more of that feel to it about like, okay, I'm here to work, and author's a little bit more like I'm about the craft or what have you,
Yes, I'm an
something like
auteur.
that. So I think this came up before in some of the earlier interviews that you've had here, but kind of wanted to bring it up again. What is your favorite Alien film and why?
Oh, now. I think I mean, it's got to be either one or two, and I tend to think it's Alien, because it's so much more subtle, and I tend to really like the subtlety factor myself. I feel like Aliens is great, but like kind of lacks a lot of. I mean, like it kind of foregrounds all the subtext, and I wasn't particularly impressed with Burke. I felt like Burke was kind of just like a garbage corporate stand-in.
No,
You know,
yeah, I hear what you're saying. It was kind of there's a bit of that in the Cold Forge. I got out of it. Um,
I like the character. He just never does anything in his own self-interest, really. Like he just kind of horribly motivates the plot.
yeah, sure. I think that's the thing with James Cameron is he's very good at just very giving you just enough of what you need to get the plot moving, and
Right.
you just sort of go with it. It's
Right. If you want a tense drama, he's not your guy. But if you want like a giant nuclear reactor scene full of an alien queen and a flamethrower and stuff, like there you go. That's the guy.
that's and that's the thing too, because it's like you talk about like in the Cold Forge, you rename them from xenomorph, and talking about how xenomorph is just kind of a general biological term, and then I'm thinking like an avatar, it's like unobtainium, it's like
Oh yeah, right.
yeah.
He's like yeah, you might as well call it like I don't give a shitium.
It's yeah, it's just call it MacGuffin something.
Right, exactly. Like he's like, you're not here for that. You're here for the explosions. Shut up.
All that said, I do I do think those two movies are the strongest of the series. I think most people would agree with that, and I think the kind of think of them as in a way as kind of like a Godfather and Godfather Part Two in essence.
Right.
They complement each other in different ways, and
Well,
yeah,
they tread a lot of new ground together,
yeah,
and I think that three is widely misunderstood. I like three a pretty good amount actually. Still, like it's unfairly categorized where it is. I think that this is what happens when you have a great story filmed by committee.
yeah.
And four was one of those things where it's just like, oh, what a wonderful experiment. Joss Whedon and a weird French director. That sounds fun. Did it work? No, not at all.
Well, that's kind of a segue into the next question I had, which was like, which is your least favorite and why?
Oh no, my least favorite easily has to be one of the AVPs. Um, yeah, I mean, do we? I don't know. Do we count that?
I don't think they're considered canon anymore. It's like it's kind of like I think the way it works is like Alien. This you got the six Alien films, and then you got the however many Predator films, and then the two AVP films, and it's like they're three separate franchises.
Yeah, well, certainly, if you're getting novel work, there it's different. It used to be different for Alien and Prometheus. So actually, when I started writing the Cold Forge, I wasn't allowed to use the black goo, and by the time the Cold Forge finished, I was because Covenant came out.
Yeah, yeah, and that's interesting. That actually is kind of a question I did have because I was listening to the audiobook and I definitely picked up on the black goo. I was like, okay, that's a Prometheus reference, and I thought that was a pretty clever way to kind of tie things together a little bit more. Um, you talked about a little bit in the earlier interviews. I guess a question I had is there um, was there more insight into that, like the marriage of Prometheus and Alien? Uh,
Like, did they tell me anything?
yeah, well, not necessarily that. Just more like, is it just like because Prometheus was its own franchise, it seems, for a hot
Oh
second,
yeah,
and then
yeah,
it was like Covenant became uh, sort of the way to kind of bring it together. As
Y-
I don't know.
yeah. And I'm not like the best Alien fan in terms of encyclopedic knowledge, but I feel like during the publicity of Covenant or before the publicity of Prometheus, Ridley Scott was like, "Oh, it's not an Alien film. It's like Alien, but it's not really an Alien film."
Yeah,
And then it came out and we were all like, "Shut up. Yes, it was." Like
yeah. When I first heard that that he was going back to do the prequel, and like I think it was like 2009 or whatever, I was super excited, and then Damien Lindelof came along, and it was like, oh, it's no longer an Alien film. It kind of just spun off into its own thing, and I was tremendously
right.
disappointed. Once it
Yeah, well, that's another example of like you can take the original recipe. So Ridley Scott, you can put him with Damien Lindelof, Mr. I can build any mystery, and yet you can still have an experiment that doesn't go like everybody hoped.
yeah, no,
If you'd
and
have asked me to describe that movie, I wouldn't have described Prometheus.
I mean, for me, I enjoy all the Alien movies, even the not
Same.
so good ones. I find something to enjoy. And Prometheus, I just got done doing a commentary of my friend Justin on that, and at the
Hmm.
end, I kind of ended up describing it as it's kind of like a, a stained glass window that's kind of been cracked.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's like yeah, it's broken, but when the light shines on it, it's got kind of a unique effect to it.
Yeah, and so I was fascinated by some of the stuff that came up in Prometheus, obviously. And as soon as I knew that the two films were gonna eventually be linked, I was like, that's the pathogen. That's the real pathogen. That's where they're going with this. It has to be.
Yeah.
And it didn't take long because the ovoid containers of the black goo and all that. You're like, okay, I see where this is going here. you know um and so I took a guess based on all available information at the time, started writing. Covenant came out, proved me right, and I was just like, yeah, all right. Like, didn't even miss a beat.
There's somehow a link between the alien and this black goo. Yeah, that
Yes, and in my mind it's they're the same creature in that uh, you know uh hey, it's kind of like, well, it was odd because people would say like, okay, well, what is Plagiaris prepotens called in the alien form, in the xenomorph form? And I was always like, I don't know, what's a human called when it's grown up?
yeah.
Like it's the same thing.
What do you because there is some mystery still. I mean, obviously Covenant kind of ended on a cliffhanger, and we don't have the final link, so to speak, between the prequels and the original Alien.
Right.
Do you think what came first, the black goo or the alien? You have any
Oh,
theories?
I think the black goo. I think I think you can see that with the moats and the other things that David hybridizes.
Hmm.
Um, I think he took the bioweapon and was like, I can make other animals with this, and he ended up making a symbiotic relationship between the goo and what became the face hugger. I think he's like the Linnaeus of that setting.
Yeah.
So he basically just breeds orchids for like 100 years or whatever.
I love that character. I think he's, he's a fantastic character. I did have the theory though, because I did think watching Covenant, there was somewhat open to interpretation because David is kind of hinted to be insane.
Right.
And I had this theory in my head for a while that it was actually like, what if the engineers were actually like making the bioweapon out of the face huggers? Like
Mhm.
if they are injecting the pathogen, what if that's the source of their bioweapon? So I don't know. That's where that question came from.
Sure. Well, the thing that I like to think about here is that you are just as much not human as you are human.
Mm,
Like in terms of your gut flora and all that kind of stuff, there's a whole lot of animals inside you, right?
sure.
And so it's really not hard to imagine an animal that has in its own life cycle, you know, picks up Nox Hydra or picks up, Plagiaris prepidens and, becomes its own incubator, you know.
Sure.
So yeah, that was the route that I guessed, and especially because he ends up Covenant with a breeding stock.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, we got to see the was the protomorph or whatever it's called in
Yeah.
Covenant, and I feel like the longer it gestates inside of a person, the better the result.
Yeah.
If I
It,
had to guess.
I think that's, it's the perfect organism because it's constantly able to adapt to whatever kind of environment it needs to in order to propagate and survive.
One of the questions that captured my attention when I was working on Cold Forge, I was talking to my biology friend, and she was like, "There's only one thing that's really, really stupid about Alien," and I was like, "Well, what?" And she's like, "Well, the fact that it gains biomass so quickly." And it's true. It's true. If you were to, it'd be like going from an infant to a fully grown adult in like 6 hours.
Hmm.
And since the rest of their life cycle isn't like that either, they seem to be able to survive a plot number of weeks. Uh, you
Yeah.
know, um, and so I started to think, what if they could strip materials out of their environment just kind of inherently?
Yeah.
And that was where the whole thing with uh, there are a bunch of different extremophilic bacteria that will eat metals and they'll eat rocks and things like that. And I thought, what if it's gaining biomass just by contact? What if it's constantly, just every surface it touches, it leaves a little etching on, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah, and that was something that's always intrigued me too, is because I remember watching these movies as a teenager, before I was allowed to be watching them, and it was that was always something that kind of in the back of my mind. Wait a minute, doesn't Alien like take place in the span of a day? How does this thing grow so fast? And I think that's kind of part of the whole thing of it being Alien.
right, it has to be a fiction somewhere in there, right? Like, so that's one of its superpowers. Acid for blood grows in 6 hours. You
Yeah,
know.
yeah, no, exactly, exactly. Um, so, kind of a question I have here is, how did you end up writing for Titan Books, and what's that relationship been like?
Sure, sure. I get this one all the time. So my very first novel was a book called Every Mountain Made Low. It was a really strange kind of gay, autistic, Southern Gothic dystopian horror thriller. Not exactly what I would call a well-known, beloved genre, uh, but it sold to a decent enough publisher. And I told my agent, I was like, "Look, we got to get some book deals. I don't know if this thing's gonna like go. Like I don't, you know." And so as soon as it hit the shelf, I was worried that it was gonna flop. So we wanted to have something else in place before then. And when you have a book deal, it's easier to go and talk to editors and say like, I'm a serious author, I have credibility, I've already delivered,
Sure.
because the thing that about tie-in is it's all lightning fast, right? You get like 4 months to write a book, 5 months to write a book at the most, and that's slow for tie-in, and and so they want to know that you can do it, that you've done it before, that kind of stuff. And so I had them set up a meeting. My agent set up like a play date with the editor from Titan at Dragon Con, and I prepared 3 pitches, and I pitched them in what I call realtor order, which is I pitch my second best pitch first. Okay, I pitch my worst pitch next, and my best pitch third. So you kind of go through this like journey of like, oh, this is pretty good, but it could be better. And then you lose faith and you go, wow, this isn't very good at all. And then the last thing comes around and is it's a home run.
I've also heard it second, first, last was another variation of that I've heard before. Uh,
Sure.
yeah, but no, that's that's a good way of going about it. Um, uh, so how many books have you written for Titan?
For
Uh,
Titan,
yeah,
just 2.
the two Alien
Uh-huh.
ones.
Yeah, they would like to work with me again, and I would like to work with them again, eventually, potentially, but there's not really any kind of time.
Sure.
Uh, I've got 2 more books on a trilogy due to Orbit, and I've got a Star Trek book due by April. So
Sure. So I know that you're working, through the publisher, but I guess specifically with regards to the Alien franchise, has anything on that end like changed at all, like since Disney acquired Fox, or is that hasn't really
oh,
affected anything?
I mean, my stuff all had to kind of go through reapproval, which is interesting because I was worried. Into Charybdis is pretty, pretty daring, and I was surprised that it got approved with no notes the first time. And so when it went to Disney, we were just like, oh, what's gonna happen here? And it came back, and I didn't have to make any substantial changes because of Disney either,
Oh,
uh, which I'm ecstatic about because I really thought that was gonna bite me.
yeah. I'm, it's interesting because I knew, I had Disney's flirted with the Alien property for a while, and
Mhm.
it's not entirely clear exactly what they're going to do about it, but from some of the rumblings that I'm hearing, I'm thinking they're gonna take it in some interesting and exciting directions. So
I wish I could write for it. I really do. That was one of the things that I always hoped would come out of these tie-in deals is a chance to kind of work with the studio.
yeah,
Uh, the only way to really do that is to be somebody who makes such an impact on the community that the studio turns around and is like, oh, I guess we have to read this book. Because I'll tell you, these studio executives, they don't like the ones who approve it read your stuff, but like the rest of the ones involved in Alien, they don't go buy all the aliens, so they don't care.
right.
Like
They're looking at the numbers. They're looking at the graphs.
right. They don't yeah, they don't read the comics. They don't listen to the whatever you love. That's not how any of that gets made. Um I wish it were sometimes, but at the same time, if that were true, I'd have to go back and read everything I missed, and there's no chance of that.
I mean, we can hope. We can hope that the landscape of the industry changes. Probably not anytime terribly soon, but you know,
Yeah.
it does seem like since I was younger, studios have paid more attention to what do the fans think about things.
Oh yeah. I mean to the point that Star Wars 9 felt like it was directed by committee.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
mean, it kind of did some of what everybody wanted, but nothing of what anybody wanted.
yeah. Uh,
Like, it's a compromise where everyone's unhappy.
I I've always said about like the two J.J. Abrams directed Star Wars films. I felt like they represented both the best and worst of blockbuster films made by committee.
That's yeah, and that's so true. I mean, because they do have some things that are so amazing that you can really only get from Star Wars.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so yeah, I get it, I get it, and it is funny to see that, and that was one of the things that actually kind of warded me off of screenwriting because originally I wanted to be a screenwriter.
Hmm.
That was what I did all my independent studies in college, and my degrees in broadcast journalism, and like I was always a TV oriented person, but the thing is, the more that I found out about the process of production, the more that I found out you kind of had to sacrifice your vision.
Yeah,
And it's really, yeah, and it's really more akin to getting work done at a big corporation. And so that was something that I kind of wanted to come in as a writer who hopefully had written something that was unignorable. And I'd love to be like one of these other big blockbuster authors. Other as in like, I wish I was in their group. That's the starter wish. Okay. And then these authors that become executive producers on their own TV series and on movies, people like the Expanse guys, or George R. R. Martin, or I'm not a big fan of J.K. Rowling, but I am a big fan of the fact that she financed her own movies and enforced her creative vision on them.
yeah,
Um, so, same with Suzanne Collins, same with Stephanie Meyer, right? Those people all paid for their own films to some extent so that they could maintain control. I would like to be like that. One of my favorite directors, not because of the quality of his work, I hate to be like that, but well, no, it's very high quality work. I think it's just for somebody else most of the time, is John Carpenter,
oh yeah,
because he writes, directs, and scores his own movies. Like, what a hero.
yeah, yeah. And and then Robert Rodriguez is another one.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I love that. I appreciate it. I'm a filmmaker myself. I just graduated from film school. I my
Oh, which one?
the Motion Picture Institute, Troy, Michigan, and my
Okay.
my film's in the festival. It's got like 4 awards right now. I'm bragging,
Nice.
but that's something
You
that
should.
but that's something too. It's like I would like one day to be a part of that world, and that's one of the reasons why I took on this podcast for Clara, is because it's like this is a way to meet people and kind of at least kind of get my name out there in some way, and have some fun talking about a franchise that I
It's a
love.
smaller world than people think too. I mean, like, when people act like problem fans, for example, like we creatives, we remember, and like when people are awesome for years and years and years, that comes up too.
Yeah,
I mean, I'll tell you that I definitely have asked Clara to help me like a couple of times, like, hey, what's canonical for this? Because you can have as many like lore keepers and archivists and whatever as you want, but those are still paid employees of the studio.
right.
Right. They don't have time to talk to you. They're talking to Ridley Scott or whatever.
Yeah,
and and so if you need an answer today, it's really hard to get one. I'll say my editor on Trek is amazing. She's like an encyclopedia.
yeah.
And so like I can send her an email and say like, hey, what is a reasonable medium to send a note in the Star Trek universe? And I'll get something back in like 30 minutes. Because honestly, how much paper and pen have you seen in the Star Trek universe?
Right. Yeah, yeah.
Um,
And that's something too. It's like I've always have been fascinated by the canon of the Alien franchise, and
oh yeah.
I'm playing the RPG right now. First time I'm playing like any kind of tabletop RPG, and one of the things I'm really pressing upon my players is that there's more to this universe than just endoparasitic alien monsters. There's you know
Right.
there's all sorts of stuff that's happening, and I think that's all important to fleshing out the world, and it's important to making the experience feel real, is feeling like, well, the world is real and it has a machine and the way it works.
Oh yeah, well, and that's one of the reasons why I got really interested in Alien in the first place, is because of the corporate dystopia angle. I mean, the comic books did such a great job of pulling that together. Um, was it Music of the Spears? Um, is that it?
What, what,
Yeah,
what, which
Music
one?
of the Spears. Is that one of them?
Music of the Spheres.
Spears.
I'm not sure if I'm familiar with that actually.
Well, it was a corporate espionage one. There were a couple of like corporate espionage ones. There was a whole lot of corporate espionage in the novels. I read a bunch of the tie-in novels as a kid,
Okay.
and I really liked that. Okay, now I'm like, did I
Yeah.
get it wrong again?
You know, I
Oh, no, there it is. Yeah, Yvonne Navarro wrote it. Um, but yeah, but there are a bunch of, I used to love stuff like that. Because I really appreciated, again, a setting that it's so bleak that like even if the alien's not there, you don't really want to live there.
yeah.
You know?
Well, and that's yeah. I mean, that's kind of the way I feel about a lot of movies because I'm also like, for instance, I'm a fan of like the Godzilla films, and
Mm,
one of the things that I think in the best Godzilla movies, it's like is the film still exciting and interesting even when there's not a giant dinosaur tearing apart Tokyo, and you know. There's not every Godzilla movie is good. There's a lot of really bad ones, but the for a lot of them, it's still engaging. And for Alien, I'd say, you know, same thing. It's like, can I still be engaged by what's going on, even
oh
with that
yeah.
monster?
I'll tell you that the hardest scenes to write are really the ones where the alien's on the page,
Oh yeah.
because it's like it's such a mercurial force. That's the first thing. And it obeys a pretty specific set of rules, which is that it's just going to screw you over in the worst possible way. And the thing is, that doesn't leave a lot of room for character development and dramatic tension and all that kind of stuff. It's the tension is cut. It's coming after you, like, and unless you have some plot excuse to not die,
Yeah.
you know, um, and so yeah, it is. I always treat it in this kind of like, if there's an unobstructed space between you and the alien, you're totally screwed.
Yeah.
Um, and I just try to make them so fast, and that if they get their hands on you, you're really just not going to live.
Hmm.
And like they don't, and they're not nice about it either. They don't. One of the things that kind of I used to hear them delighting in pain a whole lot, which sometimes I go for that trope myself, but I mostly think of them as, if I was carrying my grocery bags around and my grocery bag had a problem with the way I was carrying it, I wouldn't care, right?
Right.
If I accidentally banged it on a door or something, like, I don't care.
Yeah. Yeah. There's that. They're indifferent. They're indifferent to suffering. You know.
Right.
Yeah. They care. I mean, they're animals, and their instinct is to propagate. The only way they can and know how to. And yeah, and there's something really horrifying about being used in that way.
Oh, and I can imagine plenty of it's so easy to imagine, like, if one of them dragged you into a ventilation duct,
Oh
I
God.
bet you don't even get impregnated. I bet you get folded in half on the way over.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I bet they give up and eat you about 2/3 of the way there.
Yeah. Yeah. Then there's that side of them too, is that they're just horribly sadistic creatures, and not necessarily sadistic, but they see something living, and either going to use it as a host, or they're just gonna rip it apart. Um,
Yeah. I
just
was
like
always fascinated by the relationship between the alien and the androids.
yeah. Oh
You
yeah.
know, that to me, that's where I think there's the most kind of fallow ground for development. Um, because they the androids, every single android in every single alien movie is fascinated by the alien
Hmm.
in ways that their human counterparts just aren't. And I think probably what happened was, they kind of referenced Ash inside. They were trying to be like, in Aliens, like, well, is Bishop evil though?
Yeah.
Now we know how that first one worked out.
Hmm.
Uh, which was great. It was a great kind of anti punch that they pulled with that one. But y- you know, ever since they kind of established both of those android characters as being fascinated with the alien, and then to come around and have David. I don't remember, was Call particularly into the alien?
I
Probably not.
I've been meaning to rewatch that one, and I don't recall that there was anything like that with her.
She's such an outlier. She's also the only female android
Yeah.
in any of the films.
Oh yeah.
I think that's telling that it's Joss Whedon, right? Like, oh, it's a misunderstood magical girl.
I think in a franchise that's known for its female characters, I mean, you'd hope that maybe the first female android there'd be a little bit more to her. Oh,
Well, I think that part of the reason why you don't start with female androids is because that's a sexist trope, right? Like, look at all these receptionists we have, kind of, you
right.
know, and because androids are a servant caste, and like books that don't interrogate that, by the way, kind of drive me a little bit crazy.
Sure.
Um, but so for them to deliberately always cast men in that role, and empathetic looking men in that role,
Hmm.
I think was really smart. And so for Whedon and Janae to kind of come around and be like, and here is a woman android, and you're like, okay, I guess, but
Yeah.
like, I didn't feel the same kind of feminist influence that maybe I felt with all the other ones.
I do think now that I'm kind of the film's sort of coming back to me a little bit. I do think there was a little bit of a you know a connection somewhat to between Ripley 8 and Call because there's
Mm,
this, otherness that they both have.
sure.
They're both outsiders and they kind of sense that in one another. So
And I haven't seen that movie in at least 15 years. So like, don't flame me. Okay, like, I'm just wrong. Just let me be wrong.
oh
I'm
no no I
just talking to your listeners.
I gotta revisit that one myself.
I'd like to. I think that'd be a fun. I think that'd just be fun. Like, it's one of those movies where it's so polarizing. And I have, it's just like when I saw episode one, I was like, no one will ever call this a good Star Wars. And I now have friends that write think pieces about how great episode one is. And I feel like maybe I just missed it. Maybe the magic just wasn't for me.
Yeah, it's for me. I think the difference for me between episode one and Alien Resurrection is that Alien Resurrection feels like a movie. Yeah,
Interesting.
I,
Interesting.
I'm a fan. The Star Wars prequels to me never really felt like movies. The third one kind of gets there. It's like, okay, now I can kind of see the storyline, but it's been 20 something years and I still don't know what Phantom Menace is about. Yeah, it's
Yeah, yeah, no, we could talk Star Wars all day, but that's probably not a good idea on an
no,
Aliens
no, no, no.
podcast.
Wrong podcast. Um, Kind of getting into the Cold Forge a little bit. How did you decide on this story and why this story, this setting and these characters?
Sure. Sure. Well, I got the call when I was at UX Week in San Francisco that I was going to be pitching like the very next week to Titan. And so it was like, next week, 3 pitches. What do you got? Kind of. Um, and so I was kind of frantically trying to figure out like what I was gonna pitch, like things. And I had been kind of collecting some ideas, and that's what I tend to do that when I know that I'm gonna have to write a book eventually. I start just kind of passively collecting like what ifs and kind of big ideas. And one of the things that happened was there was a telepresence talk that was given by like I forget which robotics company gave it, but they had a little iPad on wheels. It was basically like an iPad on a Segway that would like roll around and had a person's face on it and stuff. And they had people remotely attending the conference as this publicity stunt. And I got to thinking, man, if I was in a group of survivors and one person was a telepresence person, I wouldn't do anything that person said. I would hate that person because I'd be like, you're not really here. You don't have skin. I'm about to get eaten. You're a telepresence robot. you know, um, and then I started to think, well, what if it wasn't really like that? Like, what if the person on the other end of the line really, if they lost their telepresence, they were totally screwed. You know, and then I started to think about, what kind of person that be. And I have a friend whose child is terminally ill. We're always kind of continuously amazed that she's still with us, which I'm grateful. But it's a rough disease. It's a really, really, really rough disease, and there were all these different kind of it's just, as I got older, that's when I've learned about these diseases that are kind of combinations of other terrible diseases like cystic fibrosis and multiple sclerosis combined, kind of. Um, and so seeing all the things that this kid was going through and seeing the ways that this child was suffering, and on top of it, the child is, a trans woman, and like I mean, the whole thing is just rough.
Yeah.
And and in a rural southern town too. It's
Yeah.
really, really not good.
Oh yeah, yeah. And that was something I picked up definitely when I was listening to the story. Is like there is kind of a commentary kind of on transness, because you have
Hmm.
this character who's in isolated in this room, and she's living through this other body, and it kind of brings up the questions a little bit about, like, well, who's the real me? Is it me, who I really am, or is it
Right.
the what people see and interact with? Yeah.
Well, and I tried to give her kind of, try to say, like, essentially, like, yeah, you came out to the edge of space, and yeah, your life sucks, and yeah, all this is terrible, and you're being traumatized and all this other stuff, but at least you found out who you really were.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I tried to kind of keep her relationship to her fluid gender a gift. Though that's the one thing that I'm like, I'm not gonna screw with this. I'm not gonna cause problems for this character. And it's one axis.
Sure. No, no. Yeah, I think that would have probably muddied things a little bit too much in terms of like everything that's going on in the story. But that
Yeah.
was that was something I did pick up on, and I did think about. I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting.
Well, she's absolutely trans. But the characters of the setting, all they all think of her in a binary gender, when really, by the end of the story, she's probably thinking, I need new pronouns.
Yeah.
But the thing is, the characters of the setting are not. They're not nice enough to recognize something like that in another person. They're not sensitive. They're not sweet. They're not, like,
Yeah.
they're coworkers at best.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, and they are working for this very cold mega corporation developing biological weapons. So
So I also have worked a number of years inside of military installations. And when you do that kind of work, I don't, thank goodness I don't have to do that anymore.
yeah,
But when you do that kind of work, you go into a laboratory in the ass end of a facility that, like, it takes you 30 minutes to drive through the middle of nowhere to get through the army base to get to your lab, that kind of nonsense. And I've toured labs all over the world and part of my job. And so when you see there's these characters that are in every single one of them, because it's its own world. No, like, it's not like a managed office inside the middle of a skyscraper where there's a cafeteria downstairs where everybody goes and they all kind of have a shared culture. The shared culture they have is weird. It's all kind of ad hoc.
yeah,
And so I try to capture a lot of that, the ways in which people interacted with each other, and that they should be more sensitive to one another's needs, but they're really not, that kind of stuff. I found that people in those spaces can either be, um, very kind and very understanding, or kind of aggressively careless.
yeah. Yeah,
So.
no, and yeah, that was something that I definitely picked up on. Is like there's these, I forgive me, I forget the name of the character that Blue is working with at the beginning. It seems,
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I don't even want to guess because it's been so long. I wrote that book like 4 years ago.
but he, yeah, I think one of the things that's really interesting is that he's got his own story. He's cheating on his wife and everything, and
Right.
all these characters are not the greatest examples of humanity.
Right.
About
And I tried to make him really bad, like since day one.
yeah,
Like he got there and started screwing around on his wife.
yeah. I, he's probably thinking, no, I'm out. It's cynical. He's probably thinking, I'm out here in space. I'm away from. I'm in this secret facility. Nothing. Nobody knows where this is. No information's coming out of here. I could probably get away with doing this.
That's right. Though I will say, when the whole world was stripped away, right, when all of civilization was stripped away, and it was really led down to just his instincts about what to do next. His instincts about what to do next were to be a good person. At the very end, you
Yeah,
know, and so I do like I like to think that most of them, if given an opportunity to be good, would become good.
yeah,
I just don't think that most of them really get that opportunity in Cold Forge.
sure, sure,
And I try to keep that going into Charybdis as well.
sure.
Really like to keep. I like to think that most characters think that they're good people.
Well, I think that's a human thing. Everybody's like, no, nobody's 100% the good angel. I think the only character that and I'm sure you agree that probably wouldn't do good if he was given the chance was probably Dorian.
Right? Yeah, he do what's good for him.
Right. That it's open to interpretation. Um,
Yeah,
I thought Dorian was a really really fantastic corporate bad guy. I love how um, I love how freaking evil he is. He just delights in suffering. Um,
yeah.
it kind of reminded me a little bit of almost like a character out of a David Mamet play or
Oh
something.
wow, that's high praise right there.
I mean, it's like you've ever seen like Glengarry Glen Ross or something. It's
Sure.
toxic masculinity incarnate. It was just kind of that was the vibe I was getting from Dorian.
So when I wrote Dorian, I had just changed jobs, and I had left the defense industry and gone into well, I don't want to talk about the specifics, but I was involved in a lot of acquiring Silicon Valley companies. And so you go in there and you're like, okay, look, we're gonna change the culture around here. That was my job, is I come in there and I kind of onboard them onto being part of a mega corporation. And the thing is, you meet a lot of people out there that are just amoral, that are just completely like they're all about that Series A venture capital. They want to, like they did not start a company because they want to band together and help people and create a means to survive. They started a company because they want money, and more than money, they want like to win.
Yeah,
And the thing, Dorian's establishing rule is if he feels any unpleasantness, it's not enough for him to win, someone else has to lose.
yeah.
And I know people like that. And the only reason why they don't turn worse is because circumstances haven't dictated it.
Yeah, I know some people like that too, and it's just like, man, I can't imagine how miserable of an existence that must be.
I
Uh,
don't think it is. I don't think it is. I've seen people who like, they would advocate for people to lose their jobs despite, us having enough money to float them. And it's like, well, why? Well, because I don't think that they're a very good employee. Okay, well, they don't work with you, they don't work for you. Why do you want to get rid of them?
yeah,
Well, they really just rubbed me the wrong way, is what it comes down to. Well, you're going to screw somebody's entire life because they rubbed you the wrong way.
yeah.
And people who advocate against other employees, I think Dorian's in all of them, every single one of them.
That was something that one of my favorite parts in the book is the first time that they meet. Before they actually like meet in person. Blue and Dorian is like they're each one is trying to size the other one up and trying to figure because it's like they're for both of them it's like I've never seen a person quite like this before and they're intrigued
Right.
held by each other at the same time. But yeah, that's that kind of leads into a little another question of mine is like, how did you develop those characters? You already talked about how Blue came about, but um, I guess the question I'm asking is like, how did you develop the dynamic between Dorian and Blue? I guess
Okay, so I have an answer to this. It's pretty dorky, but I do have an answer. So the way that, okay, so first of all, I knew that I wanted these two to come head to head, right? Because I was like, these, I have to fix what's wrong with Burke, right? I need a self-interested corporate actor who's going to do a really good job. Because the other thing about Dorian is he's right like 90% of the time.
Sure.
And if they had followed his lead from the very beginning, no one would be dead and he wouldn't be a murderer. So, and I'm sure that he would blame, if he were still there, spoilers, I guess, everybody, he would blame everybody else for his downfall. He would blame everybody else for his murders.
Sure.
But because they should have listened to him. Anyway, so the thing is, so the Cold Forge, as you know, is a big long station, right? I describe it kind of being like a barbell, where you got crew quarters on one end and skiff on the other, and then the launch bay in the middle. And so what that really is it's an x-axis. Okay.
Mhm.
And then over time, the state of the Cold Forge changes, right, on a really regular basis. There's your y-axis is time.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so imagine a whole bunch of Cold Forges. Um, what I did was I took post-it notes and I was like, Blue is over here on the left and Dorian is over here on the right. And I had all their events mapped. And the thing is to make sure that they interacted after a certain point, if anything after the first act, basically, if anything that Blue does isn't in response to Dorian, that means that Dorian had to take an aggressive reaction to elicit a response. And kind of vice versa. If Dorian got to a point where he could ignore Blue, Blue would have to take an aggressive action to elicit a response. And so I had to make sure that the characters were always kind of talking against one another. And then the other thing that I did was I color coded the post-it notes so that anytime it was green, that meant that if they didn't respond, the only thing that was lost was social capital.
Okay.
If if it was yellow, if they didn't correctly respond, they would lose some sort of like formal important thing, like your bedroom or your robot or your, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, or Dorian might lose his cover as an evil person, you know, kind of. And then red meant, of course, that if they don't respond, they'll die. And so I that way I could look at the kind of color gradient as it developed, you
Mhm.
know, and it was green, green, yellow, yellow, red, 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 you know, and I could say like, okay, the book, they're not turning lethal towards one another until too late in the book. And so one of the things I would do is I would start using that color scale to adjust. And so that's how I actually mapped the Cold Forge, was like I said, it was an x-axis over time.
So, so that's a really interesting approach to the storytelling aspect of it. Kind of winning and losing. Is that something you do with all your stories? Is the figuring out like what are we giving up in this scene, or or what's lost here? Or,
Well, every single scene needs to be about something for sure. I mean, to kind of pull it back to what you said from David Mamet, right? Who wants what? From whom do they want it? What's going to happen if they don't get it? Why now? Right? Those are his big questions.
yeah.
Um, by the way, I don't think I would get along with David Mamet. I don't
Oh,
consider him like a hero or anything, but he does have some great writing advice.
sure, sure.
there there are loads of famous writers that I feel like maybe aren't for me.
No, 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 100%. It's just like, but if they have something, if they have something of value to offer, use it. Uh,
Yeah.
but
He
yeah, continue.
uh so sorry, you do have to kind of map that for every single scene to some extent.
Mhm.
The thing that I like to say is, uh, that the reader always needs a reason to turn the page,
Sure.
and so even on those scenes where the xenomorph's not on the page, right, we're going to have some reason why you care. And one of the reasons why I thought you might care is because you might get addicted to Dorian's terrible saltiness, right? Um, and so when I'm doing books, I create a system for every single book. And the system used to be originally, it was very like uh, Vogler's writer's journey, kind of based on Campbell's hero's journey. It was really boring. Well, it's not boring. I think everybody should learn, kind of hero's journey, heroine's journey. Those are two different things. You should look them up separately. They're different things.
Sure.
You know? And one's not just Mrs. Pac-Man, like, um, so, but the thing is, there are a variety of story frameworks that are really well known. Things like Save the Cat, right? Robert McKee's story. And I do love to go and absorb other people's theories so that I can find out whether or not I agree with them, how I disagree, and then write books about how I disagree. All right, it's reading a bad framework that you totally hate is just as good for writing a novel as reading something that you love. I just advise you don't pay for it if it's like really problematic, for example.
For sure.
Get somebody to give you a tutorial. but the thing is, like, as I got older, I started to develop really just kind of off the wall ways of wanting to plot, because I wrote 13 books, 14 books now. I don't care about doing things the way I've always done them anymore. I'm kind of comfortable with that. I can pop off a 3-act structure in no time flat, right? But that's not always first of all, I don't always find that compelling, and second of all, those kinds of design rules don't generate things that people remember. What I want to do is I want to have every single book be an extreme version of itself, an experience unto itself, so that I can be like an auteur director, in that I have this kind of really strong feeling that I bring to everything, but that strong feeling is so different with every single book that I write because of the design rules that I kind of put into the story. That's what I'm always striving for. I don't know if I get there. The readers can only tell me if I do that. But the thing is, so like for Into Charybdis, for example, that's not a traditional 3-act structure. It does not map correctly to the hero's journey. If you were to try it, I mean, you can do it. It's kind of, you're stretching it, right? You're kind of explaining everything after the fact. But whereas I wanted, there was a very daring narrative structure that I've always wanted to try, that I wasn't sure if I could get away with, and that's why I wrote Into the Charybdis the way that I wrote it.
Yeah.
And so when you go back and you read it, I don't want to tell you anything about it, because when you go back and you read it, it's gonna be like, anyway, yeah, I don't want to tell you anything that'll bias it.
Don't feel obligated to.
But yeah, that's a really long way to say that experimenting with different plot structures is what created Into Charybdis, which I think is one of the more daring books I've ever written, even though it's a tie-in.
I'm excited to read it when it comes out. But that's the thing too. It's like, me as a filmmaker trying to write my own scripts, I'm constant. Like my first instinct is always to try and go back to one of those structures, like the hero's journey or whatever.
Sure.
Try to lay out something. And the weird thing is, like, sometimes depending on what the story is, sometimes that works, but then I also find a lot of times that just doesn't help me at all, and I just have to kind of just jump right into it and see, okay, where does this go? How do, like, because sometimes you can, if you pre-plan something, it can feel like you're trying to gerrymander it to go into this one direction,
Sure.
and it's like, well, maybe that's not really where it would naturally go, and then you start writing a new story, and then you wonder, am I still excited about this? Or
Right. One of the things that I find, one of the analogies I always like to use, is that characters inside of a story are like elements of code, and that a story is almost like a simulation. And so you run the simulation, and you don't try to control it while it's running.
sure.
And that's one of the reasons why I write really intense synopses. And then, but if something goes wrong
Mhm.
and you get a result you don't like, which happens every time I try to write a story, right?
Yeah.
um, I think that you should adjust the inputs and rerun the simulation. And so if it's different enough, your inputs have to kind of, if I start out and I'm like, this story isn't working, and then it's like, oh, this character is an amputee now. Um, that's an input, right? I can't change that for one scene.
Yeah. Right.
and and being an amputee is a way of life. If you talk to amputees, they have there's a whole like set of things that comes with being an amputee. It's like huge.
Mhm.
Um, and so, and if you write action books, you're going to write about amputees eventually. Um, it's not a gunfight until somebody gets shot, right?
Right.
And, but saying that, I think that a lot of times readers kind of lose the thread when people try to change a story while it's running, and so you're saying like, okay, well, I think that this character should give ground in this debate because I need them to get on the starship and go somewhere, you know, and that's when the reader goes like, but they wouldn't.
Mhm.
And that, as a writer, the reader's right. It's incumbent upon you to find the way where you get what you want and they get on the starship and they go off.
Yeah, yeah, no, no, 100. I always cringe when I hear people, writers, say something. Oh, well, they just didn't understand it. And I'm like, I don't think that's the right answer. I don't think that's how this works. Uh,
That's right. That's right. It's always your fault to some extent. I mean, like, now I will say I've had some readers who just really just didn't get it, like weaponized levels of not getting it.
sure.
And I'm okay with that. Like, you can eventually kind of write some of that off.
Mhm.
But generally speaking, I try to assume that if somebody didn't understand something, especially like when I'm doing beta reading or when my editor's
Mhm.
looking at something, if somebody didn't understand something, it's my problem and I'm going to fix it.
Yeah. No, 100%. There are definitely people out there that's just like, okay, it just didn't click, but that's not 99% of your audience.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So, that's interesting, and, trying to kind of figure out the storytelling process.
Well, that's why I'm here.
So it brought up into Charybdis. I did have some general questions to
Oh,
ask.
please. And
Yeah,
and I'll answer everything I can. I'll stop you if I can't answer. You won't
sure.
pressure me into saying anything.
No, 100%, 100%. Maybe later. Maybe some other time, post Charybdis release, we
I
can.
would be happy to talk about it after it's out.
Sure. But I did have a couple general questions. Um, we kind of already talked about this a little bit, but has the way that you've approached storytelling changed at all between the Cold Forge and into Charybdis?
So I think it's funny because my alien books are the ones where I deviate from my traditional plotting methods the most.
Yeah,
Because my belief is that you've already seen all the alien movies if you're reading this book.
sure.
And so there are all the cinematic tropes that you're familiar with. You're gonna be expecting it, right? You're gonna expect somebody to get face hugged, somebody's gotta get snuck up behind. There's all those things, right? And so if I just replicate the successes of the movies, all I'm going to do is extrude a product for you, right? Like, oh, we made you another one. There you go, enjoy. And that's kind of boring, right? That's the McDonald's approach of like, one thing that you love about McDonald's, their burgers always taste the same. Thing you don't like about McDonald's, their burgers always taste the same.
Right.
You know, um, so I have to go in there and try and do things that screw with traditional cinematic storytelling in order to make a decent product. And so I have to try and do things that recognize that you're reading a novel, for example, instead, so that I can refilter all of these like easy to use tropes into a completely different format and in ways that kind of startle people. One of the things that I always think about is, especially when we're talking about horror, if you haven't been, if you've never killed and stripped a deer carcass, that is one of the best things you can do as a horror writer. I was there for one of them,
Yeah.
but you only need to smell the steaming inside of an animal once. And you start to go, what if everything smelled that bad whenever we got into a horror situation?
Oh
Yeah.
man.
and so it's cool because going through and you take those kinds of experiences and then you refilter them. You take all your cinematic experiences and then you refilter them. The fidelity of a novel is interesting because on the one hand, nobody can see what you're talking about, and on the other hand, you're speaking directly into their brain. um, and so what I try to do with Alien is I try to structure my narratives in ways that that mess with that are aware of that. And so I want to be very hyper aware of of the cinematic style of storytelling and preserve it, while at the same time saying like, oh, curveball, 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 you know. So
Yeah. No, no, that's good. That's good. Um, Another question I have is Into Charybdis uh, a sequel to the Cold Forge, or is it a separate story altogether?
it is its own story. Now, being me, I'm always going to make references, right? So, but I talked with the publisher about that, and I felt really strongly that I wanted to tell a story about a completely different set of people, about a completely different setting. Now, it's 5 years after the Cold Forge, so there are a number of ramifications of what happened in the Cold Forge that matter in this book.
Sure,
So, but if you haven't read the Cold Forge, it's not you won't miss out. If you have read the Cold Forge, there's so much more here for you.
sure.
But it's not a required reading kind of situation.
It's kind of
It's like Die Hard 2 versus Die Hard 1, not like Star Wars 2 versus Star Wars 1.
or possibly even something like Prometheus and Alien Covenant to an extent.
Yeah, to an extent. Yeah, I would say that's pretty that's and in fact that's a really good comparison because it is exactly as much a sequel in the way that Prometheus or the Covenant sequel Prometheus. You could go through and you could watch Covenant, and if you'd never seen Prometheus, you might even want to go see Prometheus afterwards.
Yeah, it might clear up some things if you did.
It would, but it's not you wouldn't like fail to grasp what's happening.
Sure, right, exactly.
But you should buy both, listeners.
No,
I,
absolutely.
I say that in good faith. I don't actually get extra royalties. It's not like I'm not like Alan Dean Foster. I'm not that kind of famous. Um, I get it's work for hire. So like once that book is turned in, that's the last money I'm ever going to see.
Uh,
They could make a movie out of it. I've even waived what's called moral rights.
oh wow. Oh, that's interesting. That actually is that is a question that I have coming up for the community questions.
Hmm.
But I do have one more about Into Curtis, and I don't know, maybe it's we've already kind of went into a little bit. Is there anything more about Into Curtis that you can say that can maybe sort of whet our appetites a little bit more about it? Like what's I guess the elevator pitch maybe.
Well, sure. Well, something that I noticed about the Cold Forge's reception was that the science was really well received. People really loved all the different scientific facts. They really enjoyed
Yeah, I
hearing,
see that.
yeah, and they enjoyed seeing the laboratory environments and stuff like that. I mean, I screwed up in a couple of places. I did a terrible job rendering Australia. I am so sorry, Australians. Uh, I was just trying to make a Jurassic Park reference. That's all I was trying to do, and I screwed it up completely. And so I must deeply apologize. It's the only part of that book I'm not proud of.
Have you gotten a lot of angry fan mail from Australia?
No, no, really sweet people who are just disappointed.
Really?
And
Well,
and so I feel terribly about it. I really do. Australians didn't deserve what I did to them. And so I will I'll do better. But no Australians in Into Charybdis. I learned my lesson on that one. But the thing is, the science is back in a big way. I made sure that everything was kind of geologically sound, that things were that they were life sciences sound, that they were biologically interesting, that they, and not just in the way that the xenomorphs kind of come onto the page, but also in that same kind of like, did you know that there's a bacteria that eats toxic metals like cobalt and lead and poops gold?
I'm not aware of that.
So that if you had a filtration system built around this, you would have gold as a byproduct.
That sounds amazing.
And it's Cupravidius metallodurans, I think. It's another extremophile.
Yeah.
I had a water scientist, water treatment scientist consult on it who talked to me a whole lot about different alkalinities and salinities and stuff like that. It's a very aquatic setting. And it's based around something similar. I don't remember if it's called Devil's Kettle Falls or something like that. So there are a number of places in the world where water just kind of flows into a hole in the ground.
Oh yeah.
And we don't really know where that hole goes, and the water keeps flowing. You know, there's the Suicide Stream in England. I forget what that place is called, where if you try to swim across it, you are going to die, and it looks very placid.
Oh wow.
But it's got a huge undercurrent, and even though it looks very placid and you could actually jump across it, it's a canyon, and it will suck you down in there and beat you to death, and no one knows where your body's going to end up.
Wow, that's that's the stuff of that's where a lot of really great stories get their origin, is in just mysteries like that.
Well,
It's amazing.
Charybdis is a big hole in the middle of a lake. This is an ocean-sized lake. Because if you say it's an ocean, that indicates a certain level of salinity, and my water treatment scientist came after me on it.
Right.
uh, but um, but it's a big hole in the middle of an ocean-sized lake, and water flows into it from all sides as waves kind of overcome this atoll, which is true. You can actually have what's called a stable lava tube, where there are holes in the ocean. I actually thought this was interesting because I was thinking of Devil's Kettle Falls and the weird stream in England, and when I went to talk to my geologist, who's like a volcanologist, she was like, actually, that's really common. There are like 10 or 12 of these kinds of sites on Earth, and on any other planet, you're going to find 10 or 12 as well. And so what we have is this like really just super creepy. It's like the well from The Ring, right? Like, and all of the book is kind of thematically engineered around just this idea of kind of spiraling down into the depths.
Yeah.
And so I hope that people enjoy all the different science and the really heavy kind of thematic imagery.
Yeah.
And then again, the narrative structure, which is not like a book that you're expecting. Let's just put it that way.
I mean, you got me excited to read this. I mean, it sounds really cool. The kind of going on the science a little bit. That was something that I love nature. I'm a huge fan of nature. One of the things I did like about Cold Forge is going into kind of the biology of the creatures, but still, you know, kind of giving them sort of a little bit of realism, but at the same time, kind of preserving, you know,
Oh yeah.
yeah, kind of how strange they actually are. And I absolutely love I forget the full name of it, the scientific name for the face hugger, Noxhydria.
Yeah, Metamala Noxhydria.
Yeah, yeah, that's just that's metal to me. I absolutely, I love
Evil hand jar of night.
that.
Yeah, the so that was one of the things that was really kind of tricky actually when we were trying to do the binomial nomenclature for the creature, because it has all these different life cycle stages, and then on top of it, I knew that the pathogen was being injected into a person. Like I had, as soon as I saw Prometheus, I was like, that's not a larva. You've never actually seen a larva on screen ever.
Right.
you know um and then I was like, there it is, that's all it is. That's where the parasite comes from. That's the whole thing. It's a zygotic kind of injection,
Yeah.
right? And then it was like, okay, well, if that's true, then that's not one animal. The facehugger is not the larval form.
Right.
um and so we started to I started working with a couple of different people with doctorates in biology, because I don't have one. and so we started talking about how animals were named and kind of where the failures of the current set, like the Invictus raptus or whatever it was called, that they used to have in there, because there were all these articles by biologists complaining about the binomial nomenclature of the creature in the movies and the comics. And so I set about trying to find something that biologists wouldn't get pissed off about. But at the same time, I feel like if you share the entire family tree all the way from, because like I put them in the same, I was like, this is probably an arachnid, and all this other stuff. But at the same time, I put them in that family tree. I don't necessarily want to put that family tree on the page
Yeah.
because I need to know what it is. Sure. Yeah, absolutely. But if I tell the readers, that eliminates the room for the other writers to do their jobs.
Right.
And if you start getting too close to the truth, Fox will jump in, or well, now
Yeah.
Disney will jump in and say stop.
Yeah, it's that's the balance, and I find myself, even as I'm creating these RPG scenarios, it's like I'm creating like a whole world that I'm telling the players what they know and what their characters would know, but I'm leaving a lot of that to be discovered,
Mm-hmm.
potentially. So that's always a balance there with storytelling. How much, what was it, Hitchcock said something about suspense is the controlled release of information.
Oh, interesting. What a great quote.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah,
I,
I got some rock knocking around in my head.
no, that's a fantastic. What a cool way to put that. Um, yeah, and I mean, I think the closer you get to nailing down something that's kind of core to the mythos, the more that they complain, right? So if I started talking about how xenomorphs see, I'm pretty sure that I would have gotten that edited right out.
Yeah, no,
Because
for sure.
we need to not quite be sure. Like, does it see me? Kind of.
Well, that was one of the things that I was kind of about on Alien Covenant, was seeing the POV of the
Oh, I
creature.
know. It was so
I'm
much better in Alien 3.
Yeah, well, in case of Alien 3, it was just a fisheye lens, and that could be anything. Um, but with the squiggly lines, it's much more literal. And what was more bizarre was listening to the commentary track, and really Scott's like, I wanted to do the POV because I didn't want to show the creature, only to show it like two shots later. And I'm like,
Well, and it's super demystified it. I
yeah,
mean, I was when I was watching Covenant, I was like, you mean to tell me they see in basic visible light?
yeah,
Like, and not even well, like
yeah.
they have this weird Photoshop saran wrap effect on the edges.
Yeah, I like I said, I like all the Alien movies. That you know I have problems with some of them. That's one of my problems
Sure,
with Covenant. Um,
sure. Well, it's like a family member, right? Like we love them. I mean, I don't like love them all the time.
sure, sure. But you gotta take it as it comes along.
That's right.
So I do have some questions here from the community, and the first one from Kevin Lee Bodies, which I think is just a fantastic.
I love your name.
Yeah, I know. You actually did kind of answer this one on Twitter a little bit, and he talked about it a
I'm
little
sorry.
bit now, but he wanted to know if Disney is paying royalties to the people that are writing for the Fox franchises,
Right.
which
Yeah, so all my stuff for them is work for hire. I get royalties off of Star Trek. I understand some of the Star Wars authors get royalties. But Alien is one of those things where they really don't want to have complex chains of custody on copyright. And so they are just like, we're just going to buy the book outright and goodbye forever. And you can see why they need to do that in some instances because they're still printing Alan Dean Foster's books and they need to pay him for that.
right.
Uh, yeah, no, let me speak unequivocally on that front. By the way, they need to pay him.
No, I can see the difference there. I can definitely. It's like if you're writing these books that have been in circulation for decades now, then
Right.
that's a different sort of situation that from Alien, which people may very well be reading the Cold Forge.
Oh, that'd be great. I would love it if they still care about the Cold Forge in 10 years. I
Yeah,
hope so.
yeah. No. I think I honestly think it's a great addition to the mythos. I really do. I
I'm
really,
quite proud of it.
yeah. But but that's still interesting. Let's see. So
Oh, and don't feel bad for me. I knew what the contract was when I took it. Any of the listeners who are out there like, oh, you only got work for hire. Yes, and I signed it, and I knew what I was signing, so it's okay.
yeah,
I'm fine.
yeah, no, no, 100%. I mean, it's just it's as long as all parties are in agreement.
Right. Alan Dean Foster signed a much better deal. He deserves to benefit from that. It's Disney. They have the money.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next question is from Bradley John Swadeback. Swede,
Oh yeah, yeah.
yeah, he says, he's asking you, what is your favorite meme?
I like all the I like all the ones that he did that are quotes because Bradley John Swedbeck and Jason Ledger. Oh man, I don't know if it's Ledger or Legger. I never have asked him because I've never actually met him in person. They made this big meme campaign after the Cold Forge was finished because they wanted me to come back, and the publisher and other Alien fans started joining in. It was really wonderful, but the publisher really took note, and I was seeing memes about the Cold Forge like every week or so at least, and I loved all the ones that were like really solid quotes, like where you could almost hear the character start talking and then they start talking about the Cold Forge, like, okay, this is rumor control, we don't have a sequel to the Cold Forge yet, kind of, and so like I was just so flattered, all that stuff. I mean, that's the whole reason why I think there's an into Charybdis, is because the publisher was so swayed by the fan base.
I had no idea that there were there was a base of memes about the Cold Forge. I'll now have to check those out.
They were very, very flattering. My other publishers even noticed, like Orbit and Solaris and later Simon and Schuster. They were all like, "Oh wow, there's all these memes online about your book," and I was like, "Yeah, you should buy one from me."
I made an alien meme a while back that I was pretty proud of. It was a some shot of Ridley Scott. It was just him kind of like holding his hands up like this, and then I put the text David's.
Nice, nice.
So our next question is from Howard the Duck. How much guidance or direction is received during series canon?
Mm. Okay, so I can't violate canon.
Sure.
Okay, and canon is like anything that's on the screen, basically. That's not Alien versus Predator. That's the one. That's the one where I'm like, I'm willing to call that an exception. I'm pretty sure that's not canonical. That's basically a WWF match between a Predator and an Alien. um, but the other stuff though, I have to treat everything that happened in Alien, Aliens, Alien 3 as absolutely canonical. Luckily, I'm not working far enough in the future to have to care about Resurrection, because that's many years later, right? It's
Yeah.
like hundreds or something.
Yeah, it's like 200 something. It's so far removed from everything else. It's
Right. You can work around that one, no problem. Yeah, we're all canonical with Resurrection.
yeah.
um, but Alien and Aliens especially, they all took place around the same time. So I would go back and I would rewatch the movies a ton. I didn't worry too much about the books or the comics, as long as I wasn't going to involve any characters from the movies, and I don't. I never write about characters from the movies unless I can help it, because there's so much canon to know.
Right.
um, you don't get guidance until you turn in your manuscript, at which point your editor, yeah, I mean, you can call and you can say like, hey, I need to talk to you about Ripley or whatever, but like, generally speaking, you don't get guidance until the manuscript's turned in, and then they'll say you can't do that.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So that's interesting. It's like they don't actually they go back and like they proofread it. They don't really necessarily say, okay, here's the rules beyond just don't contradict the films.
That's exactly it. Like, as long as you don't contradict the films, they kind of stay back out of your way. And I'll say, like, they did originally try and get me to write specific books for Alien. Like, they had events that they wanted me to write, and I was like, no. I mean, I was nice about it, but I for the Cold Forge, they didn't ask me to write anything specific. They just said, "Show me what you got," and we eventually sold them the Cold Forge.
Yeah.
But when they came back, they were at a kind of a disadvantage, and so they said, "We want you to write this thing," and I was like, "Oh, I don't want to write that thing. I want to write my own thing, and you guys should stay out of the way." And what was great is they did. They were totally like, once they approved, they said, "Send us the synopsis." They sent back the synopsis with basically no notes on it. I sent them the manuscript. They barely had any edits. I think I edited the second pass of it in like a week, maybe, you know, and that's what I like. I want them to stay out of the way. I don't want a bunch of guidance. I don't care about, I only care about canon insofar as I have to.
Right. No, and that's smart. I wouldn't want a whole bunch of people like breathing down my neck about something like that either.
And that's one of the beauties about working in novels is you can take something even like a storied 40-year-old Alien license, billions and billions of dollars, and you say like, yeah, but because I'm a novelist, I can control it all by myself.
Sure. I think before I forget, it just kind of popped in my head. Probably my favorite bit of just obscure canon with regards to like Alien Resurrection. I think it's only in the special edition of the film. Is that
Uh-oh.
some 200 years in the future, Wayland Yutani is bought out by Walmart.
Uh,
That's
wait.
yeah, that's a line in the film. There's like Ripley references the company, and they're like confused, like the company, and oh yeah,
Oh,
there was in her time Wayland Yutani was the thing, but they went bankrupt and they were bought up by Walmart or something.
that's so funny. Yeah, well, they own the Colonial Marines in the future too.
Yeah,
Like the whole thing is just like one company in the future.
yeah. No, and it's kind of hilarious, especially like Walmart.
Like God Emperor of Walmart.
It's funny because Walmart is still a mega corporation, but especially in the time there was a lot of conversations surrounding Walmart's status as a mega corporation and the idea that they bought this huge company that's producing biological weapons and owns the U.S. Colonial Marines. It's
Oh,
there's
sure.
it plays
Well,
into that.
Well, and I think that even the name Weyland Yutani is kind of a reference to, the somewhat racist fears of the 80s that we were going to be overrun by Japan,
Oh yeah,
in the late 70s. We were starting to lose in the manufacturing wars, and American journalism really shifted towards a tone of yellow peril.
yeah.
Um, and so I think that while Alien handled it really well,
Mhm.
you can see a whole lot of like, essentially Orientalism shrouded in corporate nonsense
Mhm.
from that time, and the cyberpunk genre suffers from it pretty heavily.
Sure.
And so it is interesting to kind of see how those conversations between the real world marketplace and the fictional marketplace actually end up taking place.
Yeah, and especially as like times have changed and new contexts and everything. Yeah,
Yeah, we
it's
should have known that the real problem was in San Francisco all along.
I think if I remember correctly, I think it was the name Wayland Yutani came from Alien production designer Ron Cobb, and he I don't remember if it ever shows up on screen in the film, but the company was uh, Leyland Toyota originally, I think, and it was supposed to be kind of a play. Here's the Japanese car maker and the English car maker, and then later on, of course, James Cameron made it Wayland Yutani, and solidified as that. But I think it was just kind of a play on maybe at some point in the future these two competing car companies are actually now one company or something.
I mean, it's not hard to imagine a Zaibatsu getting into some trouble. I mean,
Yeah.
any American, like, there's probably like an alien breeding program inside of Salesforce Tower right now.
Yeah, and nothing would surprise me at this point.
There's just capitalist monsters up in there. Let me tell
Absolutely. So I got just a few more questions here. So we got 8-bit theorist. And I get this is sort of the same question Howard the Duck had. Is that he says books get checked for canonicity, and
you.
he's uh,
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, they get checked for canosity. I like it.
yeah.
Yeah, they absolutely do. They get fine tooth combed. I mean, and I'll tell you that as ironclad as Alien is, Star
Mhm.
Trek is even more so. If I make one elevator instead of turbo lift, I guarantee you I get caught.
And I feel like for something like Star Trek or Star Wars, that's probably watched even more than Alien, because Alien's like primarily it's just 6 films, and people only pay attention to 2 of them for the most part.
Right. The other one is like the top earner for Paramount.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I imagine there's still that group of people that are they're making sure everything's squared away.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So Jake Murphy asks if Alex could design their ideal alien video game, what would it be like?
Oh my God. So I actually Alien Isolation was pretty perfect.
Yeah.
And in VR mode, it was already too scary for me to play regularly. Like I couldn't finish it because I kept dying, and I just didn't want to lower the difficulty because I was like, I'm a real Alien fan.
I, I
Uh,
I haven't gone beyond hard mode at this point, which
that game is so hard.
yeah.
But and and a big part I thought that game was excellent. One of the things that I really appreciated about it was its dedication to the anachronisms of the original.
Mhm.
I I liked that approach, and I was massively influenced by that approach, by the way, because when when you go back and you watch Prometheus, and you go back and you watch Covenant, and they've got these cool hollow imaging tables and stuff like that that they didn't have the technology to portray in the 70s.
Uh-huh.
Uh, I didn't love that. It didn't do for me what I had hoped it would do, to see the world through a slicker, nicer, higher budget lens.
Sure.
And so when Isolation was done in this like pastiche, I mean, it's almost comically anachronistic.
Yeah.
Everything is beige keyboards with clicky keys, and all that stuff. Or they call them latch spring keyboards, I want to say.
Yeah.
Um, and all the monitors are these green CRT monitors and stuff like that. Like, that's awesome. That was like, let's just assume that it makes perfect sense for the setting and treat that as the auteur element, and all of a sudden you have an auteur game. I'd never played like an auteur game like that.
It really is. I think auteur game is a really good description of it, because it really it's almost like a triple A art game in a way.
Oh
I'm
yeah.
I've been playing. I played through it again during the course of quarantine, and I since this whole thing started, I've been my schedule has been highly irregular. So sometimes I'll be like 3 in the morning, and I'm going out to the kitchen to get something to eat, and then I'll be thinking subconsciously, oh shoot, I gotta be quiet so I don't alert the alien.
That's like back when I used to play Vice City a lot when it first came out. It was the first Grand Theft Auto to have motorcycles, so of course I would run down every motorcyclist and steal their motorcycle in that game. And then you do that for like 12 hours, and then you go for a drive and you see somebody on a motorcycle, and you're like, don't run that person off the road.
It's like, what have I become?
Oh, I know. Video games do make you violent.
It was true all along. But no, it's Alien Isolation is an amazing game. I love the fact that they basically have made it like canon. I think
Oh yeah, and it works perfectly with everything in the setting. It's pitch perfect on the tone. I mean, it's very much Alien
yeah,
the game, which I really appreciated because I grew up in an era when all the games were essentially Aliens the game, because it
sure.
was you versus the aliens,
Hmm.
and you were going to shoot them.
Yeah,
Um, and I loved Alien versus Predator. I especially enjoyed Alien versus Predator 2's life cycle mode, where you start out as a face hugger and you end up as a
yeah,
queen.
well,
That was super fun.
yeah.
Um, there's nothing more fun than startling your friends with a proboscis in their face.
No, I that the Alien versus Predator games are amazing. I love
Yeah.
those. But Isolation definitely is probably one of the scariest games I've ever played. Like
Oh yeah.
it's it's terrifying.
I
It,
used to be a real Silent Hill Resident Evil person, and so I was like, oh, this is fine. And then I got into Isolation. I was like, this is way scarier than those games.
yeah, it is, and one of the things that when they first announced it, I wasn't too thrilled with the notion. It's like, why does it have to be Ripley's daughter? Like, why does it have to go back to Ripley? And then
Oh, I feel the same way actually.
yeah, but the story that they told ended up making a whole lot of sense to me, to use her, because it's, if you lost your
Sure.
mother, you would be driven to kind of figure out, what happened. And I'm like, oh, okay,
Right.
I can buy it. It was the thing.
Well, and I love the tragic imagery of two Ripley women trying to connect across the stars and time. I think that's really fun.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I find myself being like, leave those Ripleys alone. Like Ellen had 3 chance encounters with the alien. Come on, that's too many. You
Yeah,
know? Like,
yeah, no, exactly. But to answer Jake Murphy's question, it seems Alex's ideal alien video game has already been made.
yeah, I don't know what I would do above Isolation. I mean, they already have a VR mode for it. It's terrifying. I
Yeah. I've yet to jump into the VR mode, but I should look into that. Um, so I got one last question. This is from Nick Drakis, and again, kind of went over this a little bit already. He's asking, how did you get into writing tie-ins?
Sure, sure. So again, it was kind of I had a debut novel that was already placed with a decent sized publisher, and so I used that. My agent used that leverage to get me meetings with editors, and one of the editors was Steve Saffel from Titan Books. And it's a little bit it's the truth is a little even more complicated than that, I guess I would say. The publicist from the company I sold my debut to moved before my debut came out to Titan. So Lydia Gittins moved to Titan, and she sent me an email and was like, "Hey, I'm the publicist at Titan. I'm such a huge fan of the book that I didn't get to be the marketing person for. If you ever want me to send you any books, I'll send you some books for free." And so I went to check out what they had, and I saw that they had the aliens license, and then I called my agent and I was like, "You got to get me a meeting with these people." I think we can do this. My agent, of course, was like, your debut isn't out yet. You're not a known quantity. So like you're not going to have any leverage in negotiations. And I was like, I don't care.
Uh,
So
yeah, that's kind of what kind of got me in this position a little bit. It was like Clara and I are on Facebook, and she announced she's looking for a new host, and I just jumped in Messenger. I said, "Hey, what's this? What's this that you're doing? That what you said need something for a new host or something?" And
yeah,
here I am.
yeah. You always got to go for it.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, 100%. So that's all the questions that I had, and we've been talking for nearly 2 hours now. So
Yeah.
yeah, I feel like that's a pretty good show. Um, but um, but yeah, thank you, Alex, for coming on, and for everyone. Make sure if you haven't, check out the Cold Forge, and then after you check that out, get into Charybdis once that one is available. Yeah,
I think
uh,
you'll really enjoy it.
yeah, yeah. I thought the Cold Forge was fantastic, and Into Charybdis sounds really, really exciting. So yeah, Alex, thank you for coming on the show, and having this conversation about writing and Alien and the franchise and all that stuff, all that cool stuff.
I appreciate it, Matt. I'm looking forward to coming on maybe after the book comes out. We can talk about what happened.
Absolutely, we'll talk about that. We'll figure something out when that cross that bridge when we come to it. I'm very bad at opening and closing these things. I got to get better at it.
Make yourself a script. You can never go wrong.
Yeah, I'm picking up on it. I'm picking up on this stuff. But yeah, this has been fun. I've enjoyed this. So yeah, thank you for joining us today. I'm going to
Thank
stop.
you, Matt.
Yeah, stop